Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Brand New View podcast. I am Verity Vale of Verity Vale Hypnotherapy, and in this special edition I am your guest host. You may remember me from a few weeks ago in episode 31 when I was on the show. Well, in this episode I'm going to be turning the tables on the host Marc BOUDREAU and the founder of Brand New View, and finding out more about his story, how he came to invent, produce, host and edit this awesome podcast.
I was the same old me, with the same old blues. I was the same old me, with the same old blues. I was the same old me.
That is a radio voice.
Oh, hello Marc, how are you?
I'm great, Verity. It's good to have you back in the studio.
Thank you, it's great to see you again.
Well, thank you. You as well.
Good, awesome. So, how does it feel so far to have the tables turned?
I'm a little nervous. It's like usually I've got it all planned out and I'm pulling the strings, and now I'm on the other side of the table. Well, not literally, figuratively.
Yes.
I stayed on the same side.
You did. But that's so you can do all the technical stuff, because that's your area of expertise and not mine.
Well, very loose-based expertise, but yes.
But yes, I think very clever from the stuff that we've been discussing so far. So is this your first podcast as a guest?
This would be my third, I believe, now.
Ooh.
I was on Intoxicated Podcast. Shout out, Sarah.
Whoop,
And
whoop.
Optimistically Depressed. Yet to be aired. Could never be aired. Who knows? It was a long one. You never know.
Let's shout out to Optimistically Depressed.
Shout out
Again.
Ruth.
Whoop, whoop.
And I suppose that's it. I was on like a live stream with Intoxicated Podcast, but this is the third time I'm being interviewed myself.
Ah, does it get any easier?
No.
Well,
No, I'm just joking.
have you learned anything from being a guest that has been beneficial to you as a host, do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. I've definitely learned that I can just talk forever when I'm a guest, and I don't pause enough when I normally would as a host. So actually, in a sense, there's things that I should have taken as a host, as a guest, and I haven't. But now that you pointed it out, I'm probably going to be a little less talkative and a little bit more wary of getting you involved.
Ah, that's interesting, because obviously I've sat where you're sat at the moment, and I'm thinking, I remember I was terribly excited and talked a lot and was just all brrr, and actually I'm very much more conscious being on this side of the table to be very much slower and give you the time, because this is your story, this is about you tonight.
I know, exactly, yeah. I definitely like, I think I like being a host more on the whole. There's certainly like positives to being a guest, because you just got to show up and tell your story.
Right.
I mean, I probably oversimplified it there. But I mean, there's certainly not as much pressure. I know when Ben and I first started out as hosts, we'd always be like, oh crap, like we're only 15 minutes in. Like, what else are we going to ask? We got to keep this conversation going.
Yeah.
And we somehow managed to do it for the most part. But yeah.
I think you guys did a great job.
I think so too. Shout out Ben, miss you, bud.
Whoop, whoop. Hi, Ben. So I thought just to get us started, I'd ask you some nice, easy opening questions.
Yeah.
What's that?
Some slow pitch.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll see when we get to the questions.
A couple curveballs.
So I know a couple of your listeners after my appearance on the podcast, and so I did put the vote out to them as to what questions to ask you. I can't ask you all of them. But
Are you sure? I think you should anyways. No.
I'm not going to ask you them. Anyway, so the first one that I'm going to ask you, I'm putting you completely on the spot here. If you're a vegetable, what vegetable would you be?
Ooh. I would say a potato,
Okay.
because I can certainly be a coach potato, but I'm also very versatile.
Great answer. I like it.
Shout out French fries.
And quick thinking as well. And second question then, just so we can get our flow going on. If you had to pick between having your skin 2 sizes too big or 2 sizes too small, what would you pick?
Ooh. I feel like there's like underlying meaning to this question because it's so out there. I would say 2 sizes too big because then you can just get a bunch of it removed.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. If it's 2 sizes too small, that is essentially asphyxiation.
It'd be so tight. You'd just be like...
Talk about claustrophobia. By the way, I got into a bit of a YouTube deep dive at the end of the night last night just to blow off some steam.
Go on.
Cave divers. Oh my God.
Incredible.
They're just wiggling their way through little passages, 200 feet under the earth. Sure.
Why?
No, thanks. Why is right. I want some answers, cave divers.
Any cave divers out there, please get in touch.
Please. And they come on the show, too.
Please come on the show. That would be awesome. Yeah.
I'm going to have some serious accusations thrown your way, but whatever.
And also, when you said cave divers initially, I thought that you meant free divers. So, the ones that dive down really deep with no apparatus or anything. They literally just go down holding their breath for 4 minutes.
That's crazy too. Well, not crazy, but to me it is.
Impressive.
It's death. That's a death sentence. I also have no lung capacity. Fun fact. Or not so fun fact about me.
Excellent. Okay, so now we've done some nice digression just to get us nice and comfortable.
Oh, you loosened me up.
Loosen me up. So let's start at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about you growing up.
Oh, that's thanks for asking. Talked about my Westmount years in a while. So I grew up in Westmount, which is a neighborhood in West End, Halifax. Amazing little neighborhood. It was kind of, they made it so it was very hard to enter, for cross traffic kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up outside all the time playing up the path, what we would say, in the circle, which is a little patch of grass that was, our neighborhood paths through and then road and then path. So the backyards were joined and then the path. Anyways, not a huge deal. Anyways, we were always up there playing until late at night. And I just have so many fond memories of growing up in that neighborhood. And I hope the kids today in Westmount are still out there playing in the circle. I haven't been there in a while. And by a while, I mean 20 years.
Wow.
I walk by it once in a while when I go to my parents down because it's nearby to my house. It's that particular path, but there's not that many people out anymore. I think the kids today are just inside playing their video games. Yep. Shame. Really.
Back in our day, it was very different. So
we used to play. No.
Yeah, we'd be out on our bikes. So what sort of things were you into then when you were a kid, when you were growing up?
Big sports guy.
Okay.
That's, we would play manhunt in the circle, but lots of soccer, lots of football, growing up just in the field. Competitively, I played tennis and soccer and then played hockey for fun, a little house hockey. Shout out to Halifax Hawks house hockey. Whoop, whoop. And that's kind of how I defined myself mostly growing up. I went to school because you had to do it. And
right.
It was whatever. It was fun because there was a social aspect that I really enjoyed. I loved having a lot of friends. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why I host a podcast now. I don't know. And just every day after school, I was playing sports or going to a practice, or in the morning I was going to early morning tennis practice or anything like that. Yeah. Not a lot of time to think about a lot of other things growing up. It was kind of a one-track mind.
So sports,
and excel in school because that's what you do, and then whatever.
So you say competitive tennis. What sort of level did you play that to?
Well, I was ranked in Nova Scotia back in under 14. I was number 2 for my age.
That's pretty cool.
And then top 5 in the Atlantic provinces.
Wow.
Mind you, there was 8 to 10 people in the whole thing. I don't know.
Nobody needs to know that.
It's a small community. Maybe it's grown since. I don't know. I think it's kind of plateaued around the same numbers. Mm-hmm. But I went to Canada Games in
brilliant
2005 or something like that. Didn't have a great showing, but I still have that shirt. That's awesome. Still wear it. Actually,
you're looking around. Is it here?
I thought it was. I'm looking at that blue, but it's not. That's a different jacket.
Different one.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think that playing tennis and the other sport that you did competitively, do you think that there's anything from that you've been able to bring through your life and then bring into the Brand New View podcast?
With tennis especially, given that it's not a team sport, solo sport, name's escaping me, for individual sport, I think... you had to develop a lot of composure, and you're out there, and you can't, even though you do have a coach, the rules of tennis, you can't really talk to your coach. You can't be coached by your coach during the match itself.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times you're in your own head, having conversations with yourself.
Okay.
Figuring out how to stay composed and stay calm and stay on the game plan and things like that. And I think with starting the podcast, obviously Ben was involved from the beginning with the process, but a lot of it was just sitting down with myself and figuring things out on my own and a lot of inner thought.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
I've got a fun fact for you talking about tennis.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I heard it on the radio on the way down here. And they asked something like 1,700 British people the following question. If you were to play tennis against Serena Williams, would you be able to score at least 1 point against her? And I've not got the stats exactly right, but it's something around 14% said, yeah, maybe, possibly I could. And then the 12% said, yeah, definitely I could score 1 point against Serena Williams in a game of tennis.
Yeah, double fault.
Right. Maybe, hopefully, right. So 26% of people think they've got a chance of scoring against Serena Williams just 1 point. And they then went on to talk about how she's won something like $86 million in prize money in her career. And that's obviously phenomenal. So there's at least 26% of people, British people, hi, shout out, who think that they've got a chance, bless them.
They got a better chance getting a point against Tim Henman.
Probably.
Shout out Tim Henman. Jeez,
Hi, Tim.
I didn't realize Andy Murray had retired.
Yeah, well, he had a high, didn't he? A couple of years ago, he won Wimbledon, I think.
Yeah, he won Wimbledon, won the Olympics. He was number one, world number one.
And he did win the Olympics,
got knighted.
right. Yes.
And 2 hip surgeries later, poor guy had to retire.
Oh, I didn't realise he'd had hip surgery.
Yeah, I think he's playing doubles now, but
Right.
no singles.
Okay, anyway, so I digress there slightly. So you mentioned school, and you said about your main focus was really like the sport, and that when you went to school, it was really kind of more about the socialising and kind of being there to see your buddies and stuff.
Yeah.
So if I were to go back in time and speak to your school teachers, what would they say about you, do you think?
Well, there was a common quote written on a lot of my report cards. Haven't referenced that thing in a while. Report card. Oh. If he would only just apply himself.
I had the same on mine.
Right?
Yes.
And it's like, well, sorry, I have probably ADD or something, or I'm a kid and I don't really care about applying myself. I don't know. At the time, I was more interested in the people I was going to school with. Such a talker. That's why I would get detention all the time, because I wouldn't shut my mouth.
Sounds also very familiar. I think it must be a key skill to being an entrepreneur or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, my mind is bouncing around, especially recently with so many things going on. So I sometimes find it difficult to just sit down and be like, okay, time to get organized, because I do a lot of stuff off the cuff. I just enjoy winging it, unfortunately. Yeah. And I find
squirrel.
But when I definitely should be planning a bit more, but I find some of my best work, so to speak, is when it's not so much planned.
Yeah,
and just feeling it, getting in that zone.
Yeah, you can get two in your head sometimes. If you've got too long to plan something, something I've heard before is that if you plan early, you plan twice. And so
plan yourself right out of it.
Oh, plan yourself right out of it. Yeah, you can think too much about things. So I think that both things have their pros and cons, don't they? Yeah. But, if you're the kind of guy that can wing it, that's great.
Yeah, and I think that also kind of speaks back to tennis, I would suppose, because like any sport, in theory, you can prepare and have a game plan. But once the actual game starts, anything can happen.
You don't know what the other person's got up their sleeve.
Exactly. So you've kind of got to act on the fly and make decisions on the fly. And I think that's something that I've fortunately or unfortunately taken with me.
I think take the positive. Let's take the fortunately.
Yeah, glass half full.
Yeah.
It's like 3/4.
Oh my, it's overflowing.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, so when you were a kid then, what were your childhood dreams? What did you think you were going to do when you were little?
Oh, I didn't want to grow up.
Oh, it's Peter Pan.
I was, honestly, that is, I can remember the scene. It's like the Lost Boys or whatever. And they're singing that song. They don't want to grow up. I should actually figure out that that's a real thing and it's not just in my head. But
I think it's a syndrome.
Definitely. No, not I mean the Lost Boys thing, but I mean that particular scene in Hook.
Yes.
Where the Lost Boys are singing about not wanting to grow up.
I really want you to sing that song for me now.
I know.
Can't remember it.
We're going to have to search it up.
We are. We'll do that after.
Yeah, we'll do it after.
We could put that as the music.
Ooh, Lost Boys. But I
mix
mean,
it up.
that was kind of a common theme. I mean, as I said, I kind of coasted through school. It wasn't much of a challenge until university. But it was just something, like I said, you had to do, and I didn't really have necessarily an end goal for what I want to do educationally or professionally for that matter. I was like, I just want to enjoy life. Like, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think that's a bad thing to have as a kid. I think that, that some people are really, I'm going to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. Actually, if you want to be those things, that's great. You need to know that to be dedicated enough to kind of come out with that, don't you? But I think when you're kind of, I don't know, I think it's okay to not know.
I think so too. And maybe it's a bit of a self-fulfilled prophecy. When I was like, I growing up, I knew I wasn't going to be able to have, an ordinary job or a 9-to-5 job. I was like, I can't picture myself doing that. Mm-hmm. And I often thought, and this is one of the reasons that I started the podcast, because I often thought, like, well, is anyone else thinking like this? Or is this normal? Or is this something you kind of just get over, or you just suck it up and you enter the workforce because that's just what life is? But yeah, I mean, I certainly put off entering that workforce, which I eventually did down the road and then promptly left. But yeah, it was always tough kind of finding my way, I suppose, because I didn't know which way I wanted to go. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you bring up the fact that you that's kind of why you started this podcast, because you weren't sure if there were other people that felt that way as well. And actually, I think that, and we've touched on this previously before, about people feeling that they've got to sit in that societal box, like you must go to school, you must get your qualifications, you go to university, you get a relationship, you get married, you have kids, etc., blah blah blah, and people really kind of find themselves in that box. And I think as I've got older, certainly, and this is something that you've seem to have known all along, so that's really great, is that actually you don't have to, and not everybody does. And one of the brilliant things I've found since I've been on this part of my journey is that there are more people like us, and you have discovered it, and you're brilliant because you're bringing people out of the woodwork and getting them to tell their story, and then hopefully to inspire everybody else. But sorry if I'm stealing your punchline.
No, that was perfect.
But that's what I kind of get from you guys. So I think that's really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what we've been trying to do. Find those other people that are like-minded and be like, you know what, you're not alone. It's okay to feel this way. And you can find, it's more work. And that's what's kind of funny is so many people think about like a 9-to-5, like, oh, I could never, like 40 hours. I could never do 40 hours of this work. It's so mind-numbing. And it's like, well, if you're going to start your own thing, you're going to be doing way more than 40 hours.
Yeah. Like all of the hours.
Yeah, all of the hours.
You're thinking about it.
40 hours a day.
All of the time. Yes.
But so in that sense, it's not for everyone. A lot of people enjoy going to work. They can, do their thing. And when they leave work, the classic leave your job at work or whatever. But I was just like, I can't do that. I need... it was one of our guests. He talked about work-life integration as opposed to some people who have work-life balance.
Interesting, yeah.
So I thought, wow, that's exactly what I'm trying to do, where my work is an expression of my life.
Yeah. And they say if you do a job that you enjoy, you never work a day in your life, don't they?
Right, exactly. Right. And I think that's just because people have this strict definition of what work is. And it's like, well, everything's work. You're walking somewhere. That's technically work.
Yeah.
You worked your way to the store.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to look at it. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Yeah, just trying to flip things on their head.
Do it. Ooh. We could all do with a bit of that. Okay, cool. So you touched a little bit a moment ago about kind of like going on from school and then on to university and stuff. So tell us a little bit about what happened after school. Yeah,
so after graduated from Queen Elizabeth High School, rest in peace. Doesn't exist anymore.
I was going to say, is it not there?
No, it's right next to the QE2 hospital. It's actually a beautiful garden now.
Ah.
Which is, I believe, very appropriate. So no, yeah, the high school that I went to and the rival high school that was right around the corner are both gone, and now it's just one high school.
Okay.
The rivalry ceased to exist.
So they've blended in beautiful harmony.
Yeah, like it never happened. Oh. Isn't that the future? No. Yeah, so went to Dalhousie University and did sciences, and it was just, and this goes back to like wondering how other people were feeling in university and who was, I had a few friends who were so driven and knew what they wanted and they could see their end goal and they were going to work hard to get to that end goal. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was taking, first year science, psychology, biochemistry, all the stuff that you would take. But I still wasn't, I was like, yeah, I'm just taking this because this is what I'm supposed to do. And I mean, could you really even say I was taking it? I mean, I wasn't going to class that often. I was just so disinterested. And actually, I tried it for the soccer team and didn't make it. And I think that was a bit of a blow as well because, once again, that's how I defined myself growing up, by sports.
Sport, yeah.
I had always made the teams I tried out for the most part. And so that was like, now how do I define myself? Now the pressure is really on to figure out what you want to do. And thinking back, like 18, 19 years old, that's so frigging young.
It's so
30 now, like
young.
To go back and be 18 or 19 and be like, all right, go get out of this environment. You don't need to friggin' worry about school and studies and what you want to do professionally. Like you need to discover yourself or like get on that path and find some answers and find out what you want, because right now you're doing what other people want.
That was going to be one of my questions was, what would you tell your then self?
Oh, I would tell, like, don't worry about it right now. Like, you don't need to figure that out. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do, like, whether it be traveling, which I tried to do and just it didn't really come together because I was just not focused enough to do it. Mm-hmm. Eventually I did, a decade later. But just, like, go out and whether it's your gap year or go work somewhere cool, like go down south and work for a bit, or travel,
go pick some fruit
Southeast Asia, go pick some fruit, whatever. Like experience life more than anything. Like you're caught in this mousetrap,
conveyor belt,
where it's taking where it's taking you, and you're in university. You see the things, the courses that you take, and what they may lead to. And nowadays, I mean, there's so many different things you can take at university, but all those conveyor belts, so to speak, I didn't want to go where they were leading. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't sure which other conveyor belt or which other direction I would have liked to go. Mm-hmm. But I can, like I said, with the traveling and everything, there were certainly some interests I had that I could have at least explored a bit more.
Like what sort of interests would you say then?
I think now, seeing what I'm trying to do with the podcast and everything else, I just wanted to be creative and not have any boundaries when I was trying to be creative.
Would you say that you're a perfectionist?
Yeah, but I don't perfect anything. I just don't even do it. That's what I had a problem with for so long. I was like, well, I'm not even going to start this because I can't make it perfect, so I'm not going to do it.
So then, yes, you would be a perfectionist in the sense that you would want it to be perfect, but then perhaps not be able to, so then wouldn't even like waste your energy on it, if you know what I mean. Exactly. The reason I ask that is because when you said about piano and not being, like liking it and being good, but not kind of going all the way to the end with it, I went to gymnastics when I was really small, and they wouldn't let me do backflips on the balance beam on that first time I went there. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I'm not coming back to this. And the same thing with ballet. I went to ballet and they wouldn't let me do Swan Lake the first week. So I was like, I'm not doing that.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Yeah, I suppose with the perfectionist thing, not really starting anything because I was like, well, it can't be perfect, so I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. That would kind of end up with me doing things at the last minute because things would have to get done. I wouldn't not do it. So in school, it kind of just led to procrastination. Mm-hmm. So I'd just do it at the last minute. And, it was passable, but it wasn't anywhere where it could have been if I had taken the time. And that's something I still have difficulty doing, is like breaking things up over time and then working on them a little bit here and a little bit there. Mm-hmm. Still trying to work on that.
Right. Okay. So between then the piano playing and kind of going off to university and then kind of getting to where you are now, there's still a wee bit of time unaccounted for in there, isn't there? Probably around, 5 years or sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years or something. What was going on in those years?
Well, it was beating a dead horse for a while. I
thought you actually meant that you did that then.
No, I have
horse.
I've never
Cannot
abused an
advocate
animal
that.
in my life. Although horses do freak me out, but that's another podcast. I would say that most of my time was spent trying to get that degree. From ages 18 all the way until 28 pretty much. So it took me a decade to get my degree. And that's how long it takes you to get a degree when you have zero motivation to actually get a degree. But
You got it.
I got it, and it was just one of those things. It was like, you need to get your degree. Like, at that point, it was like, figure out what you want to do afterwards. Just get your degree so you can have something to kind of fall back on. And then it was like, oh, well, now I've kind of stumbled upon marketing, because after Dalhousie and being let go from that university, I headed over to NSCC, Waterfront. Shout out NSCC Waterfront, Ray Avenue campus. And it was like a 2-year diploma in business. And I focused on marketing. And I was like, okay, this is something that I like a bit more. You know, it's more interactive. You're focused on, you know, the human psychology a bit, and it's and society and things like that, trends that are going on, and it's the real world. You can apply it. That was something that I also needed. Was like, I can't do these subjects that don't apply to the real world.
Yeah. I can definitely see that would be more up your street, and also massively, I suspect, coming in useful for you now.
Most definitely. And that was a much better experience than Dalhousie with the smaller classrooms. And so I was able to have a much better relationship with my teachers, which I had growing up, even though I wasn't applying myself. I always had a great relationship with all my teachers.
Nice.
Yeah. So finished up at NSCC, and that would have been 2015. And then I headed over to St. Mary's, because you can do like a 2-and-2 program, and you go right into third year. And I finished that off. Ooh, just got through on that one, and graduated with a degree in marketing, or business degree, commerce, with a focus in marketing. So yeah, after in the process of getting my degree in that final semester at St. Mary's, decided I was going to go on that trip finally.
Yay.
To Southeast Asia, because I have some family over there. I have an aunt and uncle and 3 cousins.
Nice.
Shout out to the Clorns in Thailand.
Whoop whoop.
And I had planned to go there, 10 years ago, because they've been over there for like 15. And finally, after all these years, bought that plane ticket and headed over pretty much a month after I graduated and got my degree. I was like, getting out of here. Time to do it. So the plan was to travel for, 2 months, which was pushed to 3 months because it was just so nice over there.
Yeah.
And then come back and utilize that marketing degree, start applying for marketing jobs or sales jobs or a little bit of both and see what happens. But while over there, as they say, that travel, I don't know, it certainly changes your perspective. You have that culture shock and you find out that, it's not the same everywhere. Like, people are living totally different lives all over the world. And that was kind of, I suppose I always questioned things growing up, being like, well, why is this like this? And why is that like this? And like, well, there's so many different types of life. And like, I can't just settle on this path that we've decided in Western society is the best path. Like, we never figured it out. Like, we're still going here. It's still an experiment.
Yeah.
And so what I noticed over there, and I've touched on this on a couple podcasts, is even though, there's still, there's problems all over the world with there's corruption and there's poverty and things like that. But one of the things that I really notice is a lot of people have so much less than what we have over here, or at least in terms of how we see it.
Yeah.
Less materials,
Yeah.
less goods, but they seem so much happier, so much more content, I suppose you could say. And I was like, dang, this seems interesting. Like, people have found their purpose, whatever it may be, and that's what brings them joy, not going out and upgrading to the new car or buying a new TV or things like that, which is great. Not to say I don't enjoy a purchase here and there gets those endorphins going, or the serotonin, whatever it is. haven't taken that in like a decade. So, but yeah, it was just like, I can't, and a lot of it was, people just outside, just very simple lies, but not this caught in an office and crunching numbers, which, in the end doesn't really matter. I mean, for some people, yes, but for me, I was like, no, it doesn't matter to me. So
you had a bit of a light bulb moment then when you were traveling, or a defining moment?
I think the light bulb was always there. I just found the switch.
Okay.
And was finally able to turn it on and realize, okay, like your life is going to be more of a journey than most, I think. Like, you're not going to be able to settle down in a regular life or a Western society life, whatever it may be. And so when I came back, I remember it was the first few days back, and I was just so anxious because I was like, obviously I came back in the dead of winter. That was a terrible idea.
What were you thinking?
What was I thinking? Well, the plan was to come back in December and then go straight to Tampa to meet my family, and then decompress in Tampa. But no, I stayed that extra month, which I don't regret, of course.
I was going to say, yeah, sure.
Definitely not. But,
great idea.
Right. So I got back, and so I was very conflicted. I was like, geez, like the plan was to get back and get this marketing degree, but now I have all these questions, and now I know that I just want to just explore more, and I don't even know. Like, I'm antsy, very antsy now. And so I remember I sat down with my mom. I think I got back on a Monday, and we sat down that Friday, and I was like, I need to do something different, but I don't know what. And my mom was like, well, and at this point, I don't think I was aware of podcasting and what it was. And I think I knew at that point, I had heard of what, like Sick Boy, which is at that point, it still is the most well-known podcast in the city. And my mom was like, you should start a podcast.
Oh.
And she was like, you've served throughout your years at university, and you've always enjoyed talking to people and always enjoyed having conversations, and you seem to have like a connection with people where they feel comfortable talking to you, and those seem to be all the qualities of a podcast host. I don't know if this wasn't her exact words, but summing it up. And she said, so why don't you think about that? And then she was like, there's this guy, and his name's Lewis Howes. And he had his own podcast. He's like a famous guy. I mean, there's his book right there.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
There you go.
Yeah.
So he's from, I don't know, somewhere in the States. And he had grown up, playing sports. He was a varsity athlete, and kind of how he defined himself. And he was, I think, a wide receiver, football wide receiver, and he suffered a really bad injury in university. And so he had to kind of give that up and rediscover himself. And after he graduated, he said, he was living on his sister's couch for about a year, just complete lack of motivation, no direction, similar to how I had been feeling for a while now. And what he decided to do was seek out the people at the top of their game. So, CEOs and elite athletes and people who just, are maximizing their potential and maximizing the potential around them, whatever that may be. So he just started networking for a while and building these relationships with these different people, to the point where he was like, hey, I'm doing a podcast. Do you want to come on? And I'm just going to ask all about your life and tips you'd have for people that want to get to the top in their industry and things like that. And he called it this School of Greatness. Yeah, he called it the School of Greatness. And my mom was like, well, why don't you do, something similar to that, but, seek out people who were like you, who weren't sure what they wanted to do and didn't feel like the traditional lifestyle was their path or goal in life. So, search out those self-starters, those people who were living life on their own terms, who decided to say no to the regular lifestyle or whatever it may be, and figure out what really got them going with that, the work-life integration as opposed to the work-life balance.
Sure.
So that's what I was like, you know what? That's a great idea.
So we have your mum to thank.
So I have my mom, Maureen BOUDREAU, shout out Momo,
Whoop, whoop.
to thank for that. Now, this was back in January of 2018.
Right.
The podcast didn't launch until December of 2018.
Okay.
So what do you think I did? I took that idea and didn't do anything with it for a while because I couldn't make it perfect.
Right.
And I kind of put it on the back burner. And at this point, I was like, well, I need to get a job. You know, like I need to figure something out. So I was like, I'll get a job in the marketing world because that was the plan all along. And I'll make some money and I'll work on this podcast on the side and kind of get it going eventually and just do it as a hobby, whatever. So I started applying for jobs and eventually started working for a magazine company. And they specialize in writing about construction companies and manufacturing companies and things like that.
Is that one of your passions, construction and manufacturing?
Absolutely not. But at that point, it was like, you know what? It's a good opportunity. It was a young crowd. I mean, everyone that worked there, they were great. I mean, very enthusiastic go-getters. But it turned out that it was really just like a glorified call center. Like most of the day I had the headset on. Oh, much like I do right now.
So you got something from it.
Oh, there you go.
How to wear headphones.
How to wear
Beautiful
headphones. And I had a headset on for, 7 out of the 8 hours of the day. And I was just calling up random companies and the other hour was spent researching companies, which was just typing companies in Google. So like construction company Manitoba, and then whatever came up, enter that company in the database we had. And if that company hadn't been called yet, look up said company Manitoba CEO and then find out who they are and then call them. And if they don't answer, send an email. And then you need all these points of contact and you're just hounding people to see if they want an article written about them.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, I can't do this. Once again, there's people that can just compartmentalize or whatever and see this is just a means to an end. This is how I'm making my money, whatever it is. Because, there are people in there that were like, loved it. It was a bit of a competitive environment, people closing like excited.
Right.
And, I remember closing and being like, I'm not that excited. So maybe this is not what I want, even though I was so torn, I guess, because I know there's so many people out there that don't have a choice. They've got to work their job.
Sure,
because they need to survive. They need to put a house over their head or a roof over their head, and they need to put food on the table. And so I was like, no, this is the path, because you struggle for a while and you put in your work and then you work your way up. And I was getting caught in that old mentality of you start at the bottom and then you work your way up, and then you once you've earned it, you can buy your house and your cars. And I was like, no.
Get your carriage clock.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, no, I can't keep falling into this. Like, this isn't what you want, and you have the means to go discover yourself. And yeah, maybe it means that you got to quit this job and go serve again, but at least that is something that's not eating you alive. And it's okay to feel that way. So I quit after like maybe a month, and that's when I was like, all right, I'm gonna go back to serving, and I'm gonna sit down and really tackle this podcast idea and hopefully turn it into something that can be a business. Because at that point, there were Sick Boy was, making money off their podcast. I think at that point those guys were doing that full time, and they still are. So I looked into, how do you monetize your podcast and things like that.
Yeah. And,
you can do your live shows and your tours and merchandise and everything like that. So I was like, okay, well, that's a start. That's a way that money can be made off this podcast, and we'll see what happens. So served during the summer, didn't get too much done productivity wise. July, August, because I do not operate in this heat.
I thought you could say you were too busy playing.
I mean, I think that was also, I finally decompressed after all. And I think I also, like, it was tough getting over that trip because I just wanted to go travel again, like, immediately. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that feeling after they traveled for a while. They have the travel bug, as they call it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those 3 months after I got back, I'd spent just worried about what I wanted to do, and then getting that job, and then having that job. And I really never took any time to just, all right, you just need to breathe and take this all in. And most July and August, I just kind of, shut my brain off and just work for a bit. You enjoy serving, it's fine, it's whatever. And then come end of August, that's when Ben and I really sat down and I guess really put pen to paper with the podcast idea. And
so what was it that made you sit down at that point then? What was it about that particular point that made you go, this is happening, we're going to do this, I'm not going to procrastinate anymore, I'm going to make this my thing?
That's a good question. And it's funny because I was looking on my phone the other day of old videos, and I took a video of me ordering the microphones, the 2 microphones for the first time on Amazon. Shout out. Boop, boop. And I remember, I sent it to Ben. I was like, "Hey, it's happening. We're doing it." And I'm trying to think if there was a particular reason. Sometimes I just finally do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just the right time.
Sometimes it's just the right time, and I think at that point, the summer was kind of coming to an end in terms of the busy months with July and August. September's still pretty busy with tourists. I mean, people are going back to work and going back to school, yada, yada. So it was like, all right, now it's really time. September, kind of that month where you can begin new things if you look at the calendar in the sense of school. And that's when I was like, let's just try and figure this out.
So how did you figure it out? So there was this idea.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mum. And
thanks, Mama.
And then you take this idea and then you've created this great thing out of it. So talk me through how that happened. How did it go from an idea to being a real thing?
Well, we Ben and I got together, a few times every week, end of August and into September. And during those months, we kind of just came up with what was our message, what did we want to get from this podcast. And that, turned into, we want to gain new perspectives and have a new view on life. And then we're like, okay, well, then we got to come up with what are we going to call the podcast? And that's, new view, new perspective, brand new view. But I think from the get-go, the main idea of seeking out those self-starters, those people have decided to leave an industry that they felt wasn't right for them to pursue or monetize their passion or find a career that's incredibly meaningful to them. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the initial thing, let's find those people that were initially said yes, like I did, to that traditional lifestyle. Yeah. But then eventually were no, I'm not doing that. I'm finding my thing. And then we're a fair ways into that particular industry, but that venture that they had begun.
So how did you go about finding those people?
Well, it's funny, we didn't need too many guests before word of mouth just took off. Yeah. But I'm lucky enough to have several friends that are it's funny, I didn't look to them earlier, but several friends that are kind of living life on their own terms. The first guest, John Mann, is a good buddy of mine, and he's a filmographer, director extraordinaire.
Shout out to John Mann.
Shout out John Mann. Whoop, whoop. And second episode, Luella, who's actually one of my teachers over at NSCC, and she was in the banking industry for many years before becoming a teacher, which is her true passion. That was a great episode, one of my faves. Episode 3 was actually, it's just kind of funny. It's sort of serendipitous, I guess. Episode 3 was a guy by the name of Tim Elms. He and his wife own a rum cake company called Captain's Rations. And they just happened to be at, they were sponsoring a hole at a golf course at one of the golf tournament that I think it was September that I played in. Yeah. And it was the restaurants of Nova Scotia, they put on a tournament every year. And I played with the Gahan House people. Shout out Kahan House.
Whoop, whoop.
Why not? And I was just like, hey, you know what? Like, you're doing this podcast. Like, you're starting to come up with who you want to have on it. Just ask if they want to do it. Why not?
Brilliant. I love that. Just ask.
Just
If you
ask.
don't ask, you don't get. You don't ever know. do you?
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly. Sometimes you just have to reach out.
absolutely.
And Tim, great guy. He was super pumped to do it. And we recorded that, a couple weeks later in my parents' spare bedroom. And he was a really cool episode. That was really fun. And then kind of just got going where I had a couple other friends that were able to be guests, and then started to get a following on Instagram, and people would just start reaching out and recommending other people. And then some of those guests would recommend people. And that's just how, Halifax it's still pretty small. We're starting to get that big city feel, but we're still a pretty close knit community.
Yeah, I was told that a lot when I moved here, that people, it's a lot of who you know. And like the networking I found has been really great here. Gosh, you've created the brand new View network. So make that into a thing.
Ooh, I like
I
that.
would like it noted here first that I'm involved.
Verity has coined the brand new View network.
Yeah,
Ooh, the new View network.
let's do
it.
it.
I think that was another cool thing that we didn't realize. We kind of did, but we had no idea that there was this massive community of creatives that were all involved with one another, collaborating and what have you.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the biggest realization, that I was like, oh, all you had to do was ask.
And it's so cool, isn't it? Like being around like-minded people. It's just
It's invigorating.
invigorating. Yes, great word. I was going to go with awesome, but awesome is so overused.
It's a great word, especially the way you say it. You can say awesome as much as you want.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So in terms of podcasting then, so you had a background of science, and you'd kind of gone into marketing and business, and you'd been traveling, and then you decided to make a podcast. And I don't, from those things I've mentioned, gather that there's any like technological kind of training in there. So like, how did you learn how to make a podcast?
Well, as a lot of the creatives nowadays like to say, University of YouTube.
Excellent.
Honestly, actually, I give a shout out to Pat Flynn's channel on YouTube. I don't know. He's got a check mark, so he's like famous or whatever.
Okay.
But he has. I recommend, if you want to do podcasting or like a bunch of different side hustles, he has his YouTube channel, Smart Passive Income. That's what it's called. So he gives tutorials on several different ways to make smart passive income.
I'm going to take a note of that.
Check it out. And one of those ways to make a smart passive income is podcasting. And I just kind of came across it because I searched on YouTube. I was like, so how do you start a podcast? What do you need? You need microphones. You need this. And you can really find, aside from the professional world, or whether, medical world and all that stuff, you can learn anything online.
Well, I can't learn to be a surgeon.
Actually, you know what? You might be able to. You wouldn't get the
I'd be good at
practice,
that.
but yeah, of course. I
think I would be.
The textbooks are on there, but
Come to me for your cheap operations.
we've been practicing
years
on
of medical
the
school.
Operation game. That's it.
I used to love that as a kid.
Operation.
It's like, I was like,
Oh God, yeah.
jump.
Seriously, got startled there just thinking about it.
So you started off with very limited knowledge, and then have clearly taught yourself. And when I've been in here and I see you with the stuff that you're doing, it looks fabulous, and you clearly know what you're doing. You put on a very polished effect now, and it's wonderful. You had a few people that you knew, and then you decided to start asking people, and then the brand new View network, trademark, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or not.
Registered,
yep. Something like that anyway.
Copyright.
All of the above. Then began to kind of happen, and people began to get in touch with you, and the ball really began to kind of get rolling. At what point did you realise that this was something that actually had got legs, that was going to go somewhere?
I honestly always believed it would.
Okay.
And I'm a firm believer, and maybe not as firm as I was before all this because I've seen it now. It's like the universe will kind of reflect what you give it.
Yeah.
But you also have to believe that you deserve what you want.
Yeah. And make a bit of an effort.
And you've got to make a wholehearted effort. No half-hearted, no half-assed. It's going to go with whole-assed, but that's not a thing. No, I think back to when I thought it would be something. I think I always believed. I was like, okay, I want this to be something. So I'm not going to let it be anything less.
Brilliant. So this is your why.
Yeah.
Or your what?
All the above?
Or yeah, something like that.
Sure. Who knows?
So you always had belief in it, and you knew that it was going to be something, and this was your thing. You had finally begun to kind of get like, this is something that I feel passionate about. Would that be the right word?
Definitely.
To use? And so it began to kind of come together. So then where did it go from creating this podcast? So the smart passive income thing was like, make a podcast. Then when did you begin to realize what it could grow into from there?
I think probably just recently. We definitely initially were like, okay, so like I said, the way we can monetize this is we can eventually, once we gain the popularity, we can have the live podcast and we can have some merch. We've got a logo, so we can put it on, hats and t-shirts and sweaters and things like that. And then eventually we get popular enough, we can add advertising. Companies can advertise at the beginning of the podcast and whatever, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then potentially, like, you could go a cross-country tour and perform in live podcasts in different cities. So that was kind of where we were aiming. We were like, okay, let's just, provide a great product and continue to have on great guests. And
get bigger and bigger. And then and then Tony Robbins comes on, or,
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the things that I'd read, and that was one of the things that Lewis Howes said, was with each guest, you get a window into their following. Yeah. So each time you have a new guest, you potentially gain some of their followers and so on and so forth. And so we kind of saw it as, over time growth, like a long-term growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting because I'm typically about just like immediate returns.
Gratification.
Yeah, let's go here. I need it now.
And so do you still have that same view for it, or has it taken any different turns? You're going to add to that?
Well, it sort of has. And now with Brand New View Podcast, we're starting BNV Media. We now have a second podcast called The False Nine. And that is a soccer or football, which you would call it.
Yes.
Podcast.
Yeah.
And we have a few other podcasts that we're working on. So now the focus has kind of turned to creating an original network of podcasts, which can be then used as kind of our, I suppose, collateral for BNV Media, which will be podcast.
That's got something in there as well,
Ooh,
isn't it?
Podcast.
You could like bring back old episodes or something and call it Podcast.
Ooh.
Like a Throwback Thursday.
Yeah. Or it's like the history podcast. It's called Podpast.
Podcasts. I bet you there's one called that already.
Yeah, there probably is. There definitely is.
That we'll put on the list of research later.
Everything's been thought of. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still do it, because you can make a better version of it.
Exactly. And everything is just borrowed from somebody else.
Exactly. I mean, like, the piano is an instrument that was created by someone, but doesn't mean everyone else can't use it and create their own magic.
Exactly.
Right?
So you're creating a network of podcasts.
Yes.
And then Brand New View Media.
So yeah, BNV Media.
BNV Media.
Brand New View. That's what the BNV stands for. I don't know if I think we'll still call it BNV Media. We're still kind of figuring out. We're doing a bit of a rebrand.
I like that.
But I like BNV Media. I did some testing. And BNV Media.
Check you out.
Was far and away the more popular choice. But what we want to do is just offer brands and companies chance to have their own podcast. So we start, right from the bottom up, work with them and come up with an idea for the podcast and the vision, what they want to do. We'll provide, audio, technical, and sound engineering and everything like that, and theme songs. Well, if they don't want to do it themselves, we can be the hosts or the storytellers, whatever it may be, and then even put it on iTunes and Spotify for them. And that could also be, we can include the social media aspect for the podcast if they want to be present on Instagram or anything like that. And so that idea kind of came to be within the last few months, where we were noticing a trend where a lot of companies were doing that in Toronto and in BC, and have already been established for a few years. It just hasn't happened in Halifax yet. So we're like, well, we've got our blueprint. It's already there, and it works, or at least it works in bigger cities. But I mean, Halifax is getting there, as we said.
I mean, look at all the building that's going on.
Right, it's open season for buildings right now. If you're a builder, come to Halifax. But yeah, I think
businesses.
Right, exactly. But I think another encouraging stat was Halifax right now is the startup capital of Canada. There's more startups per capita than any other city, which means there's a bubble, and we got to get on that bubble before it bursts.
Absolutely, and you're right at the beginning of it, with this being the first guys to offer this, because I think podcasts are becoming more and more popular, and more people do seem to be doing them. And I think that actually a lot of people, and myself included, actually, I would think I wouldn't know where to start. I might like to do one, but I wouldn't have a clue about what to do, like the editing, I could probably think of the content, and I could think of the getting in touch with the people and the marketing around it, but actually the techie side of it, I'd be like, oh my goodness. So, on that note, in terms of what you would offer people, would you offer them, various packages? Like you could have the whole caboodle from we'll help design, think about your concept, we'll help give you think of content, then we'll help you record it, we'll do all the editing, we'll do all the marketing, we'll get you followers, or you can sort of cherry pick bits and pieces of that. What would you kind of offer?
Yeah, I think, like you said, we'll offer anywhere from everything to one thing. If you already have your idea in place, if you want to be the host, or even if you have your own equipment but you're not sure how to do it, then we just have the consulting, where we come in and we show you the process of how it works, how you need to upload it and to your host, whether that be Libsyn or Podbean, or I would recommend Libsyn. We're not going to do any others. So, and or if you have your idea but you don't have any equipment, then we have a studio. You can come in and record your podcast. We've got our mixer and our Mac here with GarageBand. I mean, it's, for me, it seems pretty simple. I think it is. I don't really know. I shouldn't say that. It's very complicated.
It's very complicated.
It's so complex.
Only Marc can do it.
But then, we'll make sure that everything records properly, and then we can edit as well. Or if you know what you want, you have your vision, you have your equipment, you know how to record it, but you just don't want to edit it, then we can just edit it. We're going to be very flexible in that sense.
Would you offer training to people as well? Would that be something maybe on
podcast camps is another thing we looked
camp?
at. Yeah, actually, yes. Ben sent me something today, funny enough, is in the States starting now, which you see, we're starting to see the trend, it starts in the United States, then it gets up to, the west side of Canada, and then eventually makes its way out here.
Yeah.
But there's podcast camps for kids.
Wow.
Now,
cool.
Relatively new, not sure if it's going to take off. We'll keep an eye on it. But there's YouTube camps for kids.
Right.
I heard on the radio the other day, the number one thing that kids want to be now is YouTubers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what are parents going to do?
Send me videos of them. They're like, and this is my doll, and this is what I do with it, and la la la. Because there are kids on YouTube doing that, and that's what the kids are watching. And it's like, oh my goodness! But some of the kids are making so much money because the other children watch it, and then the advertising around it. It's crazy. But sorry, you were saying about parents are sending their children to YouTube camps.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, parents are gonna, pay for what their kids want to do more often than not. That's why there's the YouTube camps now. Obviously, some parents just send their kids to whatever camp they went to, but if it's popular enough, if it's what kids want to do, if it's what everyday person wants to do, there's going to be an opportunity to make money on that business.
I think that's a great idea.
I think so too. I know that there's, I think a couple people have put on some like podcast, like mini camps, I guess you could say.
Right.
Like a little, like you come in for an hour and someone speaks, you pay $10 to hear, you know, the basics of podcasting and that kind of thing. But there's no real podcast camps, I suppose you could say. So that's something we'll definitely offer. I mean, right now the studio we have is a bit small. We certainly want to upgrade eventually, and then we can actually have multiple studios and multiple people teaching how to, you know, create and produce and edit and everything.
Brilliant.
Hopefully.
So what is it about you that makes you so good at this?
Well, thanks for telling me that I'm good at
That's
it.
okay.
I just really, I don't know, like it's always been who I am, interested in people more than materials, I guess. And so I think I guess I owe it to people who want to do their own thing and want to discover something new that could potentially lead to their passion, to give them that opportunity, so they don't have to figure it out when they're 30 and they can figure it out when they're like 22.
37 for me.
But that's fine. You know what? Age is just a number. I mean,
It is, yeah.
don't be discouraged if you're 40 or 50 or 60. You still have a lot of life left. And
Definitely.
it's so weird because you think about it. It's like, well, if I have some time left, it doesn't matter when the time is. I should still decide to do things that I want to do, but we just don't do it. We're such a stubborn bunch, us human beings, and we don't like change. And
No, we do not like change.
No,
We don't.
but
But it's never too late.
we do. It's weird. It's like up until it happens, we're like, no, we don't. Oh, I don't want this. I don't want this. And then the change happens, and it's like, oh, I don't know how I didn't do that
It's
so
amazing.
long ago.
Why didn't I get an iPhone before?
Shout out Apple. What?
Oh.
Where's my free iPhone now?
Yeah, and me. So why do you think that this is being such a success?
I think we're seeing a bit of a trend where people are, there's just so much information out there, and it's so much harder to control certain narratives, and so many people want to change the narrative. Shout out Terrence Taylor. And I think people are just realizing that they have a lot more power than they ever did. Like they can make a change. They can enact change.
So do you feel like you're giving people a voice?
I
And
hope
then
so.
giving people that didn't know that they could have a voice and an opportunity, giving them a little bit of a leg up and a belief that, you know, you can do it.
I think that was the biggest thing, was our Ben and I, our initial theme or goal was, think about like, if you could have had this podcast if we could have had this podcast when we were, 18, 19, 20 and lost and not knowing what to do, what would we want to hear?
Yeah.
Or what would have helped, or at least provided a bit of comfort. And that's what we wanted to do. That's what I hope we have done.
Yeah. So, in terms of how things are going, obviously pretty well. The fact that going on the telly tomorrow morning, it's a pretty good indication that things are going well, and you're reaching quite a lot of people, and you've got lots of people approaching you now. Is it better than you expected that it would be?
Oh. That's an interesting question, because I'm trying to think back, and I was careful not to assume any particular expectation, I guess. I think when I said, we wanted it to work, we wanted to make it a thing and a certain success. And obviously we somewhat defined that initially by, having the live podcasts and a tour or anything like that. But I think we kept it open to really anything.
To be organic, to go wherever it went.
Exactly. We were very careful not to define the success a certain way. And just because I think that was the overall theme of the podcast, was like, you define your own success.
Make your own path.
You make your own path, and you may switch to a different path. So we wanted to be very flexible.
I like that. Very good. And so if there are any, I don't know, aspiring podcasters out there, what advice would you give them?
Well,
come to BNV Media.
Yeah, come join the team. Well, it's funny because like it's just like it's Nike's slogan. Like, you just do it. At the end of the day, it's podcasting, and we didn't know that we'd be starting this new idea with BNV Media and producing podcasts for businesses or brands or whatever that may be. But we just started by doing a podcast.
Yeah. And
do it wholeheartedly and feel like it can become something. Like, you can't have the negativity. Like, I forgot, I think it was a Joe Rogan podcast. Shout out Joe Rogan. The difference between like a negative thought and a positive thought. Like, a positive thought can go away like that, but a negative thought can linger.
Yeah.
And it can affect your performance, and it can affect people's moods around you, and it can just affect that energy. So you just want to have that positive energy, and you've got to practice that positive energy, because
you do. I agree.
It's tough. I mean, we're so naturally negative some of the time, and you look at the media, and like, that's what the media covers, because I don't know, for some reason, human curiosity, we just love to see disaster and negativity and whatever that may be. And you got to steer clear of that most of the time. I mean, you got to be informed, but like, you've got to just sometimes just put on the blinders and do your thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked you earlier on, what would your school teachers have said about you? You told us about that. Now, if I were to ask your parents, like, what skills you've got and what's good about you to be able to bring to this table, to this Brand New View podcast, what would they say?
I would say they would say I have really good people skills, I suppose. I think they would say I'm very approachable, and people often find themselves able to confide in me, or it's easier to confide in me. I think I'm a pretty trustworthy person and accommodating. So I think I would just, more than anything, like, whether it's working with another client or whether it's hanging out with a friend, like, I never want that other person to feel like they can't say what they want to say.
Yeah. And do you think your friends would say the same things about you?
I hope so.
Oh. Well, I agree with, like, you know, as much as I know you, I would agree with the stuff that you have described. So.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay. What do you do when you're not podcasting, or is podcasting my life?
Oh, well, I can't remember if we touched on this or not, but I do a little bit of serving on the side still. Podcasting's not paying the bills yet. Eventually. It will. But I serve part-time, sometimes full-time, depending on how many recordings I have or meetings in a particular week. Try to just take as many shifts as I can. Gotta make the money. Gotta eat. But I'm trying to, I don't know. I think it's hard when you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business, and especially when you're just starting out. There's always something you could be doing at any point in time.
Yes.
So I'm finding it difficult to enjoy downtime, I suppose.
I suppose if you're enjoying it as well, then that is your downtime as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just important to not take on too much. I mean, I know a lot of entrepreneurs say at the beginning of everything, you got to say yes to everything, and that's kind of what I've been doing, and it's fine. But you've also, at a certain point, need to realize if you've spread yourself too thin, and now you're just doing yourself a disservice.
Sure. So what's your motto?
What's my motto? I feel like I have a few mottos, maybe. But I think, like, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and none of us knew we were going to be born. None of us asked for whatever this is.
Nope.
This
true.
is, I don't know. This is life, and we're still figuring it out. And it's okay that we're still figuring it out.
Oh, yeah. I just think of the changes that are going to happen over the next, even 5 years, let alone the next 10, 100. Goodness.
Right.
Wow.
There's just so much more to discover. There's so many mysteries that I don't know. I mean, certainly that'll never be figured out in our lifetimes.
Oh, great thing, right? What would be the answer to the biggest mystery? If anyone could say to you, right, here's the answer to that, what would it be?
Oh, let's go with a topical one. Are aliens real?
Oh, come on.
Storm Area 51, let's go. No. What would be the biggest mystery? What comes after death?
Oh.
Because I feel like that is the one thing that
We can't answer.
we can't answer, but every human has tried to.
Interesting. Who's your target audience?
Who is my target audience? People are always like, you don't want to have too broad of an audience. You've got to have your niche audience. You need to hone in on that audience and then really focus on that. But given what our theme is, we really wanted to stress that it doesn't matter how old you are. You can still decide that you're going to start living life on your own terms. And obviously we've talked about different circumstances and different lives, and it can be a lot harder to leave certain lives at certain times, but it doesn't matter how old you are, and it doesn't matter who you are.
Mm-hmm. And that's for your listeners, for your Brand New View listeners.
Yeah.
But in terms of BNV Media, who are your target audience for that part of the venture?
For BNV Media, we mostly want to do B2B. That's where we would, I think a lot of our business would be. Obviously, if certain individuals want to have podcasts, and I know there's a lot out there, we can provide that as well. And that could be potentially a different payment plan. We'll figure it out. But yeah, mostly targeting, I would say, newer brands that you look at the podcasting demographics, and it's 24 to 34, that kind of area. So we would, for starters, for sure, be targeting businesses that target that demographic.
Yeah,
which would, just because it aligns pretty easily. But that doesn't mean that other businesses shouldn't have podcasts, because we see a trend going towards podcasting in general for a new form of media. And I think that's just because it's not censored. Like, anyone can create this and put it on iTunes. You don't need to go through Universal Records, you don't need to go through Universal Records to get on iTunes for your podcast.
Yeah.
All you have to do is get a mic. You don't even need a mic. You can talk into your phone.
Right.
Upload that audio onto whatever it is, GarageBand or Audacity, and then put that on a host online, and then iTunes can retrieve it, whatever. There you are. You now can get your message out to the entire world.
Wow. So, Marc, that's great. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute blast being able to come back here and interview you and find out your story. There's so much about you that I didn't know. It was all about me last time, but this time it's been great to hear your things and to see the vision that you have and where it's going to go, and, how well you're doing. I'm so pleased for you. So before we kind of cut off at the end of today's special episode, hosted by Verity Vale, is there anything that you kind of want to say to the listeners out there on this podcast?
Well, first of all, thanks for doing this. This was fantastic, Verity. I'm hoping that the listeners appreciate it as much as I did. We've been meaning to do this for a while, flip the tables, as we've been saying, and give you a little insight into why I kind of started all this, and so it was nice to tell my story and set the record straight. Now I'm joking. So yeah, I mean, for everyone out there listening, we really appreciate the support and the continued listenership. As I've mentioned in the last hour and change. You know, we've got a lot of exciting things coming up for the media company and for Brand New View. Look out for an actual live podcast where you can get tickets for it in the near future.
I will be keeping my eyes open.
Oh yeah, we'll be talking about that in the next upcoming month or so. And yeah, I mean, just at the end of the day, do what you want, and just because other people are saying you shouldn't, that's just because it's not what they want, and that shouldn't matter. Unless it's, you know, don't cross the street when the light is red. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Unless there's no cars coming. That's fine. It's not jaywalking. I looked it up.
Oh, and don't hurt puppies.
And don't hurt puppies.
Don't hurt puppies.
Get your pets spayed and neutered.
A dog is for life, not just for Christmas. Mark, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been brilliant. So good luck to you for the rest of the journey. And yeah, it's been brilliant. Thanks very much.
See ya.
Bye.
With the same old blues, I was the same old me. With the same old blues, I was the same old me. With the same old blues, I was the